I hope that you're having half the fun that Mark and I are having. Yesterday, I had the pleasure, in fact, he stole my line about the kids. We don't put our kids to bed at night telling them bedtime facts. We tell them bedtime stories, although we do put customers to sleep sometime telling them facts. But yesterday, I hope I kind of awoke a little bit of the child artist in you when we did the whiteboarding. Today, we're not going to go through any more whiteboarding, but I want to bring out from you now this storyteller that's inside of you. I would wager that if you were asked by your boss, what did you do last week? You will probably go into, I met with this customer, we did this, I executed this is the call to action. You kind of report, right? Report mode. If, however, you talk to a loved one or a family member or an in-law that maybe is not a loved one but just a family member, if you were to talk to those people and they ask you, so what did you do last week? You'd say, oh, I went to this place and we did that and I talked to this person and you should have seen it. And all of a sudden you're telling stories. You're a natural storyteller. So to begin with, I'd like for you just to take a second. We're going to take a look at a story. Enjoy.
ये मैं, ये यूसुफ, लंगोटिया यार सी मेरा। लाहौर में हमारे घर के सामने एक बड़ा बाग था। उस बाग का गेट बाबा आदम के जमाने। रोज शाम को हमने वहाँ पतंगे उड़ानी और उसके बाद जाके यूसुफ के दुकान से झझरिया चुरा के खानी।
झझरिया?
और मेरा साहब नमस्ते।
नमस्ते। मेरी पोती मुंबई वाली।
और बेटे क्या हाल चाल है?
बचपन की तंग गली फिर से कूदे फांदे, छोटी छोटी मीठी चोरी गांठ लेके बांधे।
हेलो, अस्सलाम वालेकुम।
फाजिल स्वीट्स?
हाँ जी। दादाजान, दिल्ली से किसी की कॉल है।
हेलो,
यूसुफ अंकल?
कौन?
जी मैं सुमन बोल रही हूँ दिल्ली से, आपके बचपन के दोस्त बलदेव जी की पोती। याद है बचपन में आप दोनों झझरिया चुरा के खाते थे?
बचपन की तंग गली फिर से कूदे फांदे, छोटी छोटी मीठी चोरी गांठ लेके बांधे। एक पतंग सा उड़ता था परिंदों की तरह, परिंदों की तरह, परिंदों की तरह। एक दौर था मन मन मोर था, एक दौर था मन मन मोर था।
पार्टीशन के वक्त हम रातों रात हिंदुस्तान आ गए।
दादू?
यूसुफ दी बड़ी आजादी।
कागजों की कश्तियों में डूबा रहता था, झांकती खिड़कियों में उलझा रहता था। वो भी क्या दौर था, मन पे न जोर था। एक दौर था मन मन मोर था, एक दौर था मन मन मोर था।
भैया थोड़ा जल्दी।
हाँ जी। कौन? हैप्पी बर्थडे यारा। यूसुफ, यूसुफ वो यूसुफ, मेरे बल्लू, यूसुफ यार।
Okay, if you did not feel something in that, I want you to check your pulse. All right? Seth Godin's told us that people are no longer in the market of buying goods and services. They're buying stories and relations and magic. Arthur C. Clarke went so far to say any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. In fact, a lot of people, when we start talking about Watson, they almost are like, that's just magic, right? The people in the room, you and I, we're in the story and relation and magic business. In fact, my grandchildren, when they come over, they spend time over at my house, and sometimes I work from home. And if you ask any of them, what does Papa do? They'll tell you, he makes magic. That's what I've taught them. He makes magic. And every day is a chance for us to kind of tell that story about the magical things that we do and how we can actually help our customers. Story matters, and there's a reason story matters. First of all, a story can describe what happened. In 1974, Philippe Petit, a French acrobatist, came to New York City, strung a cable between the World Trade Centers, 400 meters above the ground, proceeded to walk out on the cable, spent 43 minutes out on the cable, made 8, I think, trips back and forth, never stepping on a building because there were policemen waiting to arrest him. He did this one morning. That's the story. I just described to you what happened. If, however, you've been to New York City or you know about tall buildings, I could tell you that morning, it was a morning. He did this at night. A 435-pound cable, I think they had to stretch across. Wired it up, harnessed it up, never had it tested before. But yet, people were coming to work. It was a little hazy, but they could see that dot walking between, and they were like, what in the world is that? That's so out of place. Now I helped you see what happened. That's a good story. Philippe Petit, I actually happened to have a chance to meet him at Connect-Ed at a conference a few years ago. He's an artist in residence in New York City. And he tells the story of that morning. And I remember on stage, he spoke about how he had that bar in his hand, and he was ready to step out. Now, this was a cable that had not fully been tested. So many of you may have seen the documentary or the movie. But standing on stage, he's holding this bar, pretend, and he steps out with his left foot, and he said, I put my left foot on the cable, and I could feel it moving, and I could feel the wind, and I understood that the farther I'd get out, the farther it was going to take me, and I was thinking, what am I to do here? But I still have my right foot on that building. He said, and I kind of leaned forwards, just still testing things out, knowing that at some point I was going to have to commit, and then I stepped on it. And when he did that at Connect Ed, the audience of a couple thousand people all went, we all felt that tension. We all felt him making that move. That's a great story. If you can get someone to feel something, that's the story you want to deliver. Why do we even care? Because a thing that can be the good product is a better story. How many times have you been in a debrief and you said, I don't know why we lost that deal. We had the better product. We had better solution. We had more capabilities. If you have a great product and a mediocre story, and you give me a mediocre product and a better story, I will beat you every day. Okay, we have great products. We need great stories. Also, the thing about stories is as I'm describing things to you, or as I'm talking to an audience, or I'm talking to my customer, if I can relate to you in some way, stories actually neurologically have been shown that as I'm talking to you, and I'm talking to you about the morning and a foggy morning, if you've ever been in a foggy morning, the synapses in your brain that are firing off actually are mirroring the synapses that are firing off in my brain. And think about that from a sales perspective. Having someone who you want to influence, their brain is firing like yours. That's not a Jedi, these are not the droids you're looking for kind of moment, but it is something that they're actually beginning to relate to you. Stories carry meaning. There's a lot of ways you can get information across, but stories help you carry the meaning. These things are important. John walked on the roof and Bill picked up the egg, Pete put on the helmet, Jim gave a speech, Frank built a boat, Harvey flipped the electric switch, and Ted wrote the play. That looks a lot like a lot of our presentations. By the way, this is not an IBMer or one of our business partners, but we put up on the screen, here's the things, this, and then this, and then this, and then this, and this. The question is, are you educating your audience or enchanting them? Okay, your goal is to be memorable. What good is it that I just told you 8 things if you don't remember any of them? Now, in a room of this size, I'm sure I've got people with eidetic memories, but can anyone tell me who from the previous list picked up the eggs? Anyone? Gave a speech? Why did I even tell you if you're not even remembering? That was 30 seconds ago, or 60 seconds ago, and you don't remember that. How much do you relate to customers that when the next slide, they've forgotten what you just said? That's not your goal. Okay, stories help you carry that meaning. So if we connect the information with stories, I don't have time, for instance, to take that previous list and connect it to stories and build up stories and so forth, but I'll use stories, and please excuse me for those who are not US citizens and so forth. Some of these may be a bit of a stretch, but I'll use some story figures. Santa walked on the roof, Easter Bunny picked up the eggs, Viking put on the helmet, Martin Luther King gave a speech, Noah built a boat, Thomas Edison flipped the electric switch, and William Shakespeare wrote the play. Stories can help ideas be more memorable. So who picked up the eggs? Who walked on the roof? Who wrote the play? Isn't that a whole lot better to have people remember something? You need to find that story. You need to find that place where you can connect to someone and carry on something. Now, at this point, probably 8 minutes ago, you saw that Google reunion story. How many Google solutions can you recall? And I want you just to shout out to me. What did you see? Search? What type of searches? An airline search? Immigration search? Locations of places? You saw this throughout, okay? Within that little story, there were 8 features shown, only 40 seconds of screen time, and only 20% of the story was about the product. But you remember it because of the story. The story was what carried the meaning. How many of you remember this particular scene? I wish, is Inhi in the room? Maybe she can tell me. Does Google use our weather? I don't know if they do or not, but what about this scene actually do you recall? He looked at the weather, and then what did he do? He went and put an umbrella in the suitcase, remember? Do you remember what happened next? When he got there, it was raining. Google, by the way, just told you that not only can they tell you it's going to be raining somewhere, but when you get there, it's going to be raining. They proved themselves. Now, they didn't make a big splash. Look, it's raining. See, we did this. They never called that out. Subtlety works. A lot of times you can give people directions or inferences. And if you can get an audience to infer what you want them to be, you want them to understand, if you can get them to come to their own conclusion, you know how they feel? They feel smart. It's like, I saw that, you know? That's pretty clever. I did that. Because this quote is a wonderful quote. I love this. People will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but you'll never forget how you made them feel. You know, if we were to implement the debriefing, as you walk out of a sales call, one of the first questions you should ask is, how do you think they feel right now? Depressed? Scared? Stupid? Are they fearful? Are they happy? Are they engaged? Are they excited? What's the feeling I just left them with? It's important for you to know that stories carry that meaning, and stories help people feel well. And telling good stories isn't hard. You are professional salespeople in one of the world's largest companies, and I have to say that it's a very complex job that you do. What you do on a daily basis, just to get a deal negotiated and through the system and all of that, that is hard. This is not hard, okay? But this will help you be successful. It's truth that if you went out on the web and looked for story instruction, you'd see all these things about, you know, a hero's journey, and it builds up to this, and it comes down to this, and then he has this complex theme, and there's all these characters and so forth. I believe that stories that we can use, we as sellers, and in our day-to-day work with customers, it's not so much that. It's much simpler. In fact, there's a gentleman by the name of Sean Callahan. He lives down in Melbourne. He left IBM in 2004, so he's lived our life. And in 2004, he started a company called Anecdote. And he wrote this book called Putting Stories to Work. In that book, he mentions a spectrum. Now, over on this side, we have the capital S, the big stories. These are the, I'm on the wrong side. Legends, fairy tale, epic adventures, those types of things, okay? So it's the time when you can build up a character. It's when you have 15 minutes to tell a story, and you can start building up the plot and all that kind of stuff. Rarely will you as a salesperson or as a CTP or as a business partner, will you have 15 minutes to tell a story. You're usually going to have to tell stories very quickly. In fact, I do this training for some of our direct sellers on the phone, our call center people, and I tell them, you've got like 30 seconds to capture their attention. You better use an example, an anecdote, something that's small, that's a very short story. And what I also find interesting is that we often attribute stories to things that aren't stories. I did a search, and I just wanted to hear a CEO tell his story. So I did a search for CEOs and their story, and this is a company who did this, and I'm going to apologize ahead of time for those who are not English speakers. You can read this next story. I'll try to read it to you. But this is the story that was posted on their web. Our brands enhance the technology that connects us to the people, activities, and experiences we love. Our products are renowned for the simplicity and ease of use to make wireless connectivity mainstream around the globe. Our newest brand is a leader in delivering customized smart home experiences. Its power empowers people to monitor, measure, and manage their electronics, appliances, and lighting on the go. That's not a story. Okay, that was just a list of assumptions. That was just a list of things we think. There was no story there. I've been at IBM for a while, and I'm going to pull up something that's going to be an old school kind of thing. And I have to, first of all, tell you that what we've done in the area of client references has become so good right now. But there's still some of these decks and some of these slides that still hang around. So you apologize. I'm about to show you a client reference slide. I decided not to use one from this brand. I'll use one from a former brand, okay? Colleagues in Care. Does any of that look familiar to you? Have you ever seen decks like this? Oh yeah, somebody said, okay. I mean, it tells the company's name, Colleagues in Care. It shares some facts. It states the need, you know, it's an expanding global network. The solution uses this, whatever, engaged software, the benefits, a list of the benefits, all right? All the components that you think are a story, but that's not a story. If I shared that slide, that reference slide with you and told you all of that, that's not a story. Let me tell you about Colleagues in Care. Colleagues in Care are a group of medical professionals that have hospitals and universities in the U.S. where they practice medicine. And that's what we're going to call evidence-based medicine, because things are kind of sterile and in a pure environment. They then take that medicine, that practice, and they go out to places like Haiti, you know, where places that are ravished because of a disaster, and they practice their medicine there in reality-based medicine. Now, one of the things they do there is they stay in touch with the people back in the U.S. and through the hospitals. They converse with them, and they don't use like just email and conference calls and one-on-one conversations. They actually use a social network, the one that you might use at work, which is IBM Connections. Okay, so they use this connection software, the social network, to talk back and forth to each other. At one point, there was a young girl who was struggling, and the doctors were struggling with how they were going to treat her. And they asked the people in the hospital, so you know, they were actually using the social network. They had kind of a conversation thing going on with a bunch of people. And they asked, what should we do? And the hospital told them, well, what you need to do is you need to take a throat culture, put that in a petri dish, and then put it in a dark room for 24 hours. To which they responded back, what are you talking about, a dark room? We live in places that we can't even keep the rain out. How are we going to have a place that can't keep the light out? That's like impossible. We're going to have to find something else. But because they were actually speaking in a social network that they and their fellow people could see, one of the college students that was there, which just happened to be an intern helping moving supplies around, posted, I was in one of those big shipping containers. You know those big metal shipping containers? He said it was almost empty, and he said I was in the very back of it getting the last bit of the supplies out, and as I picked them up, I turned around, and the doors to the shipping container, that big metal closed. Boom. And he said it was dark. It was scary dark. He said so much so I had to put the stuff down, kind of feel my way, find the doors, open the doors to get a breath of fresh air, because he felt trapped. He said, what if we told them to leave one of those empty shipping containers with us? Maybe we could turn that into a dark room, which they did, which helped save lives. And also they shared that idea with other doctors and other practitioners, so that now it's almost standard practice. When they set up the first shipping container that's empty, it stays. That's the story of Colleagues in Care. Okay? Now, are you going to remember that? Did you feel anything? Did you hear the doors close on that shipping container? Have you ever been in scary dark? I mean, it is scary. You can imagine that, right? I've now basically brought you in. I would wager that after this is over, next Monday, Tuesday, in all the busyness of all that you do, if I were to contact you and say, tell me a little bit about that Colleagues in Care story, those kids and the doctors in Haiti, I would wager that you could recount most of that story to me. I would wager that if I showed you the client reference slide, you could recount none of it. Stories matter. There's some hallmarks with stories. So this is where we're going to get into. By the way, in your workbooks on page, I think it's 18, you actually this is going to be some work, okay? You guys are going to do some work here, but I'd like for you just to keep track. There's a place there for you to put some story hallmarks. These are the things that kind of attribute to story. The first hallmark is a time and a place. If you're telling someone, a customer or someone else, a story, and you just begin by saying, well, Bob and George were talking, and they were saying this, and they did this, and whatever. Whether you realize it or not, your listener is trying to figure out who the heck is Bob and George. Where are they? Are Bob and George doctors and they're in a hospital? Are they shop floor workers in a warehouse? Are they office workers standing next to a car? Where are they and what is this? If you start off by telling them, last week, I was standing at a coffee machine in a local office. That gives them a time and a place. Their brain can actually rest a little bit and listen to your story. Otherwise, they're trying to figure it out. They're looking for clues. When you're trying to tell a story, you don't want people, their brains wandering around. You want to direct them. So go ahead and give them a time and a place. And it can be as simple as last year, I was out with a customer. That gives them something, right? 3 years ago, we were working with this retail company. That's all you need, time and place. The next thing you need, which is kind of obvious, is you need connected events. In a story, as was mentioned, as Mark mentioned earlier, you start off and then you have something that happens and you keep going until you finally have an end. Well, with connected events, the reason I even put this up here is because when you do a story, you have a start and then you move along. You need to make sure that those connected events, first of all, connect, that one leads to the other. And the other thing is you need to know your stories ahead of time and kind of practice them, because I don't know how many of you have done this, but I have a father-in-law who was a missionary in Bolivia, South America. And he worked in the jungles with the Iowa Indians. And he can tell wonderful stories. And he'll be telling these stories, and we're sitting on the edge of our seat, and we're 15 minutes into the story, and we're just captivated. And then he'll say, oh, I forgot to tell you that he was the chief's son, and he was also a pilot. And it's like, that just messed up the entire story. It's like, now I'm back here again, right? You need to make sure that you connect things so that it all flows. Also, you don't need to add any extra things. There's a thing called Chekhov's gun. There was a French novelist who was asked by another novelist for some advice. This was the advice he gave. If you say in the first chapter there's a rifle hanging on the wall, in the second or third chapter, it must absolutely go off. Okay? Have you ever had someone tell you a story and at the end you go, why did they tell me that part? Have you ever watched on TV, they'll show two people, talking, and they'll be going back and forth the dialogue. And then the screen will pan down just for a second to the telephone and then come back up. And then what are you thinking? The phone's going to call. Who's going to call, right? You're sitting there listening to the dialogue, but you're thinking, the phone's going to call. And then the scene ends. And you go, crap, what was the phone about? I mean, it's like you feel like disappointed. Why did you do that? I have watched us present and demonstrate stuff that's a rifle on the wall that never goes off because it has no importance to the customer, or we never explain why it's there. And whether you know it or not, your customer is trying to say, okay, you said that there was 4 points, and you did 3. Where's the 4th one? Or why did you even show me that? So make sure that you have this connection of events and that things connect and that they work together. Most stories will have people in dialogue. The reason we like to use stories with people in dialogue is because people can relate to other people. If you use animals, that's called fables, okay? But we usually use people in dialogue. In fact, it's been said that if I am ever talking to you and I say, out in the hallway, I was talking with Maria, and Maria said, and I start to quote something someone else said, the thing that I am telling you is a story. It may not be a good story, it may not be a long story, but it is a story. It's been said that story is the only way that you can carry dialogue. If you put people in dialogue in your story, it makes it human, which helps us connect to people. And because you're not in the business of telling stories, because you're not in the entertainment business, customers don't pay you to come and just entertain them, you need to make sure that your story has an insight. There's something to it that's going to be something fresh to them. It's not just telling a story to make them laugh. Now, you can do that at the bar, that's fine. But in a business results, what you're wanting is revenue. And the revenue is going to come from you giving them an insight that they didn't know. The colleagues in care story I told earlier about the kids. The insight is because you work out loud, and we're having a conversation out loud, and not through a closed email or through a circuit where only doctors were talking to doctors. Because of that, they were able to succeed. They were able to save a life. So make sure that your stories, you plan for an insight. So these are the 4 story hallmarks. Now, why should you personally care about story? You know these two guys? All right. So there's a guy, Daniel Pink, he wrote a book called A Whole New Mind. And then he spoke of the time when, at one time we were all in the agricultural age. We were all just farmers existing. And then we moved into the industrial age. And the industrial age actually is when work began, when we started defining work. Over here, this wasn't called work, it was called living. And now we have places we go and it's called work. Well, then we moved into what was called the information age, and now he says we're in the conceptual age. These two guys kind of depict for me these two ages. The information age relates to functions, looks into argument, tends to focus, swayed by logic, changes series. Kirk, however, he relates to design, stories, blend, empathy, fun. Does that kind of look like your IT person and your line of business person to anyone? Okay. How many of you have ever done a demonstration in front of an IT person, a technology person, and the demo's going great, but there's one of your buttons is blue, and it's on the lower right corner. And the IT person goes, why is that button blue? It should be red. All the other buttons like that are red. It should be red. And why is it there? It should be up here. And for the rest of the demo, all they can see is that red button. Why is that red button not there? They focus on that. They laser focus, and they'll argue with you forever as to why that button's blue. What does Kirk do? What happens when we push it? Let's push it. What happens? I mean, it's like, let's see how this thing flies. Please understand that Spock is important, okay? He's not trivial. But who flies the Enterprise? Who owns the Enterprise? Who makes those command decisions? It's Kirk. You've got to reach him. You've got to reach Kirk. You've got to make him feel something. You've got to tell the story. By the way, Spock happens to be half human. And he does have a heart. It beats green blood, but it's still a heart, and you can find it. The point is, if you go in pitching to Spock, you'll lose Kirk. If you go in pitching to Kirk, Spock may be entertained. You'll eventually have to talk to Spock. Just dismiss Kirk from the bridge and talk to Spock, whatever that is. But the point is, you can get technical, but don't start there. The story habits, you need to develop habits. I'm not going to convince you to be a storyteller and you walk out and all of a sudden I'm going to hand you a badge and you're a master storyteller. You need to start developing some habits. And the first habit is you need to listen for stories. You have heard great stories over the course, Brian Rant stories and some of the other sellers that have stories. These are great stories. You need to hear those and you need to remember them. And why? Because you can use those same stories. You don't have to give the company name. I have done this for years. I stand in front of a retail company or whatever, and I say, I was with a retail company once, and one of our customers, and you tell them the story. Now, it's not the facts, it's not how much money they made and whatever, but you tell them the story about their experience and about their solution and about their pain and about how they won over and some insight. I have never, to this date, had a customer come up to me afterwards and say, I want a reference on that customer, I need their name or whatever. They're engaged in the story. So you need to listen for those stories that you can use them. Second, your responsibility is to share your stories. I appreciate those sellers who actually share their stories and have done so in videos. I challenge you that if you come up with an idea of how to better reach a customer, or you try something, there was a kid that did a pizza box story about how he couldn't get into an office, he could never get into the office, and he finally just bought a bunch of pizzas and acted like the pizza delivery guy, and they let him in. And he walked in with all these pizzas and gave them out to the IT people, and they were all eating. And they said, where did this come from? He said, I'm IBM. And they let him stay, and he sat over pizzas and talked to them. If you know that story, you can kind of share those stories. This, by the way, the finding the story is probably one of your most powerful tools as a seller. Don't let your customer just say, here's my requirement. I need a business partner onboarding system. That's what I need. How many of you get Excel spreadsheets with these things? I need one of those. You could either play the part of a pharmacist. Oh, you need one of those? That's your prescription 1 minute. I have 3 of those. Do you want the generic brand or do you want the extra brand? You could be that, or you could actually be the doctor, which is what you're supposed to do, and go, that's interesting. Tell me a little bit about that. We need a partner onboarding system. Great. Give me an example of, for instance, your current onboarding system or your current situation. Well, we have problems bringing partners on. Awesome. Can you give me an example? Well, give me an example of one partner. You don't have to name them, just give me an example. And have them tell you the story of a partner that they lost and why they lost it. The reason you want that is twofold. There's a saying that says that you can tell a culture by listening to a story, and then you can change a culture by changing its story. If you can get that story, well, we had this partner and they came to us and they did this and this had happened and they didn't get enough information, and they tell you the story, then you can say, okay, now I think I understand. What if instead, when that partner came to you, you've met them this way? What if they were engaged this way? What if they were onboarded this quickly? How would that change things? You have now changed their story. You've not introduced your story, you've changed their story. Learning stories and getting the stories is important because you can change that story. The second reason you want people to tell you a story is because if a person says, I need a business partner onboarding system, and you say, great, give me an example. We need one of those. Give me an example. If they can't tell you the story, they either don't know the problem, in which case you should say, well, tell me who can tell me the story, or second, which is even worse, they don't trust you. If they're just giving you a requirement and they're not willing to go any further, they don't trust you, because anyone who says, I don't want to share my story with you, they don't care about you. So you've got a trust issue. But if you can get someone to tell you their story, you're halfway to a sale. The fourth is to be prepared to tell your story. Now, I don't have a story like Jeremy Waite, okay? God bless him. My why story may be different. And your story about your particular industry or your particular, how you've actually said, it could be your personal story, how it affects you. It could also be a story about a close customer of yours who you've befriended, and maybe you take them out for drinks, or maybe you golf with them or vacation with them or whatever it is. That's almost like your story. You can tell about that friend that you have and what they did and how maybe you saved their job. That could be a story for you. Never should you sit in front of a customer and have them say, so you're telling me that if I do this, it's going to help me in this way. How did it help you? You should have that story ready. And the fifth one, I know that the book I don't think has 4. Maybe I added this one too late. Habit 5 is be brief. And I know this quote has been attributed to a number of people. I'm from the South in the U.S., and Mark Twain's I'm a big fan. But it's hard to make things simple. It's easy to write a long letter. It's hard to write a short letter. Okay? So with that, we're going to exercise. We're going to have time to exercise. This is where we actually get into some activity. I'd like to introduce you to, first of all, the thing called a story spine. I think on the facing page, maybe it's page 19, there is an example of a story spine. Matthew Lund is a gentleman from Pixar. I did a couple workshops with him. Matthew wrote things like The Incredibles and helped out with Toy Story and what was it, the others? There was a couple of other cars, and yeah. So he did these, okay? So he's a skilled guy. And they have a thing called a story spine, and it goes like this. Once upon a time, something happened, and every day, something else happened, until one day, and because of that, and because of that, and because of that, until finally, and since that day, and the moral of the story is. Once upon a day, there were superheroes. And every day they fought crime, and they battled villains, and they saved the planet, until one day it was determined that they weren't needed anymore. And because of that, they had to take on normal jobs and hide from the public. And because of that, they longed to get back into, y'all know the story I'm telling you? It's The Incredibles. Anybody who has kids have seen The Incredibles. Okay? That's the story of The Incredibles. Every one of Pixar's stories follows this spine. I'm telling you that you can build a story that relates to your industry using this spine. I'm going to show you a couple, but the first one I'll show you is one I did some time ago. This is one on Watson. Once upon a time, there was a wicked, smart group of people. Every day, they'd spend their entire day pondering big problems and finding unique solutions, until one day, they were in a bar and they saw a TV game show. And because of that, they dreamed of a system that could understand language and help humans make better decisions. And because of that, they focused their creativity on designing a machine that would augment humans. And because of that, they created Watson. Until finally, they birthed, raised, and taught Watson to help humans ask better questions and make better decisions, and they kicked butt on Jeopardy. And since that day, Watson's been helping cancer patients, children with learning challenges, chefs, musicians, designers, screenwriters, marketers, and all manner of creative humans solve big problems. And the moral of the story is a human and a machine can do far more than a human or a machine. Okay, so that's the story. No. It'll be a movie later, okay? We'll turn it into a Pixar movie later. No, but that is how you take and break down something like, for instance, Watson. Your challenge is going to be, I've got 30 minutes here, but you guys were excellent artists yesterday. I brought that out of you fairly quickly, I hope. And we're on a time thing, so I'm going to try to make this. Let's do 15 minutes to start. We may let you go 20. But as a table, you're to take that spine. Now, this is a group effort. It's in your workbook. Build out a story about a solution or a story about a customer, however you want, 2 to 3 minute maximum. Don't write a long thing. If it doesn't fit in that square, it's probably too long. And you have to designate a storyteller at your table. The reason why, we're going to select some tables to come up here and share your story. All right, is that putting pressure on anybody? It's all going to be fun. Please make this from a customer's perspective, all right? I have done this with IBMers in the past, and the stories I get are, there once was a big retail company. Once upon a time, there was a big retail company. And every day we would try to get to their CEO. And until one day we finally met him on the golf course. And then finally, because of that, it's like they tell their story. This isn't their story. This is the customer story. An example of that. This is, once upon a time, there was a guy named Brian. Brian was the chief digital officer at a large retail company. And every day, Brian and his team of web developers would show up to work and spend most of their time just maintaining the myriad of systems they purchased. Until one day, they decided to quit looking back and instead move forward. Because of that, they knew they needed a modernized architecture that allowed them to separate core components from their extensions. That would keep them from the dilemma of rewriting code with every upgrade. And because of that, they needed a market-leading solution that not only had a full range of current capabilities, but also was a thought leader in the industry, which, because of that, they knew they must incorporate AI capabilities for their customers and their marketing professionals. Until finally, they were introduced to Watson Commerce v9 from IBM. And since that day, Brian and his team look forward to coming to work because they can focus on innovation that matters. And the moral of the story is IBM WebSphere Commerce v9 improves the quality of business, but more importantly, it improves the quality of life. Just ask Brian. Okay, that is v9 story in this spine. So as we wrap up, these are the things I hope that I conveyed today. The stories actually matter, they carry meaning. They're important to you. You should actually use them. They're important to your customer. If you show an interest in story, you're actually showing an interest in your customer. And so this will build a reputation as well as a relationship. Now, I'd like to give you just a few resources that you can use. I know we're all book readers, but here's some books. Putting Stories to Work, which was the book that was given away to the winners. I would highly recommend that. That was from Sean Callahan. Start with Why is always a good one, just to kind of get what is the crux of the story. There's two books here. Either one of those are good. I have them both. Talk Like TED and TED Talks. The book on the top here, Presentation Zen by Gar Reynolds, that will change your life as to how you build presentations. The way most of us build presentations is completely wrong. Okay? In fact, if you go to my LinkedIn channel and scroll down a bit, you'll see an article I wrote on the story of a presentation. And it actually talks about, I was challenged to give this type of presentation. Here's how I did that. I organized it this way. I talk about the way I did it with Post-it notes, how I delivered it, and it actually has a video of me delivering it. So you might, maybe it's something you could use if you're having trouble with presentations. And then one of my friends, Guy Kawasaki, his book Enchantment. Again, it's about how you enchant people rather than just educating them. And then lastly, let's recap. Who picked up the eggs and walked on the roof? And rode the plane. After all of that, you still remember that, okay? In closing, let me know how I can be of service, okay? You are actually my customer. I serve you. So if you have stories that you need developed, if you have ideas that you'd like to present, if you have presentations, if you have teams, whatever it is that I could possibly do to help you build more revenue and to bring in more business or be more relatable, please allow me to do that. I would love to do that, be of service to you. So with that, I thank you.